Welcome to International Narratives presents The Birth of a Nation, Key Moments in Early American History. I'm your host, Johnny Young, and today we arrive at the grand finale of Season 1, a journey that began with rebellion and revolution, marched through Gilded Ages and Great Depressions, endured wars both cold and hot, and now brings us into the era that defines so many of our own lived experiences, the modern era. From 1991 to the present day, America has undergone a whirlwind of transformation. In just a few decades, the world has become more connected, more digitized, and in many ways more divided. It's a time of innovation and upheavals, resilience and reckoning. This is the era of the internet, of 9/11, of smartphones and social media, of political polarization and populist waves, of cultural revolutions and calls for justice echoing across generations. In this final chapter of Season 1, we'll explore how the United States emerged from the Cold War as the world's sole superpower, and how that role evolved amid crises, conflicts, and cultural change. We'll uncover how ordinary people spark extraordinary movements, how new technologies reshape society, and how the echoes of the past continue to shape our future. So plug in your headphones and press play on the present. The story of the modern era begins with a sense of triumph. It was 1991. The Berlin Wall had fallen. The Soviet Union had collapsed. The Cold War, the decades-long ideological standoff that had shaped global politics and American domestic life since World War II, had come to an end. For the United States, this moment symbolized victory. Democracy had prevailed over communism. Free markets over state control. America stood alone at the pinnacle of global power. But in that moment of victory also lay the seeds of future trial. With great power came new responsibility, and a rapidly changing world would soon challenge American ideals, systems, and identities in a way no one could fully predict. Ah, yes, the sound of progress, or, for anyone who tried to browse the web in the 90s, the sound of patience being tested, the internet. Once a tool of academia and defense, was about to revolutionize the world. Email, e-commerce, search engines, and social media didn't just change how we communicated, they changed how we lived. In 1995, only 14% of Americans had internet access. By the year 2000, that number had jumped to over 50%. The rise of companies like AOL, Netscape, and Amazon signaled a new digital frontier. The term .com boom captured the gold rush mentality that defined the tech economy, where new startups became billion-dollar empires overnight, just as quickly went bust. But while the tech world buzzed with optimism, the real world was more complicated. In 1992, the nation watched as the Los Angeles riots erupt following the acquittal of 4 police officers involved in the brutal beating of Rodney King, an incident caught on videotape and broadcast across the country. The unrest illuminated long-standing racial tensions, police brutality, and systemic equality, issues that will continue to ignite national debates until the 21st century. Rodney Glenn King was a 25-year-old African-American man whose 1991 beating by LAPD officers became one of the first nationally televised examples of police violence captured on camera. His haunting question, asked during a press conference, "Can we all get along?" became a symbol of the country's struggle with race and reconciliation. Meanwhile, America's role as global peacekeeper was being tested in unfamiliar ways. In 1993, U.S. troops were deployed to Somalia in a humanitarian mission that quickly turned violent. The Black Hawk Down incident underscored the risk of international intervention in a post-Cold War world. And in 1995, the Oklahoma City bombing carried out by domestic terrorists reminded Americans that the threats to democracy didn't only come from foreign shores. On April 19, 1995, a truck bomb exploded outside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City, killing 168 people, including 19 children. It was, at the time, the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in U.S. history, carried out by Timothy McVeigh, a U.S. Army veteran motivated by anti-government beliefs. As the new millennium approached, the country saw unprecedented prosperity. Unemployment was low, the stock market soared, and in 2000, America experienced one of its most contested presidential elections in history. A race so close it came down to a handful of votes in Florida and a controversial Supreme Court decision. The 2000 presidential election between George W. Bush and Al Gore was decided not at the ballot box, but in the courtroom. A recount dispute in Florida led to the Supreme Court's decision in Bush v. Gore effectively handing the presidency to Bush. The legal and electoral controversies would shape political distrust for years to come, but the optimism of the 90s would be shattered on a single morning in September. On September 11, 2001, terrorists hijacked 4 commercial airplanes. 2 struck the World Trade Center towers in New York City, another hit the Pentagon, a 4th crashed in Pennsylvania Field after passengers fought back. Nearly 3,000 lives were lost. The nation was changed forever. In the wake of 9/11, the U.S. launched a war on terror, invading Afghanistan in 2001 and Iraq in 2003. The Department of Homeland Security was established, airport security was overhauled, and the national psyche, once confident, became cautious, anxious, and fiercely patriotic. As we stepped into the 21st century, America would continue to grapple with its ideals and identity, from the election of the nation's first black president to the rise of digital misinformation, from mass protests to mass shootings, from climate crises to cultural wars. The story of the modern era is still being written, and that's where we begin. By the early 1990s, the United States had emerged from the Cold War not only as the dominating global superpower, but as the undisputed leader of a new world order. Communism had collapsed. The Soviet Union had dissolved. The bipolar tension that defined the latter half of the 20th century was gone, but in its place came a different kind of uncertainty. America now bore the burden of leadership in a multipolar world, balancing economic dominance with diplomatic responsibility, and soon coping with challenges no longer constrained to traditional battlefields. Domestically, the 1990s were a paradox. Peace and prosperity, paired with political scandal and social upheavals. The tech boom created new wealth, new industry, and new millionaires, almost overnight. Silicon Valley replaced steel mills, code replaced coal, and the so-called information superhighway reshaped how Americans worked, learned, and lived. In 1993, the launch of the Mosaic web browser made the internet accessible to the masses. By the end of the decade, companies like Yahoo, Amazon, and Google had become household names. For the first time in history, information was at everyone's fingertips, and the pace of life would never slow down again. And yet, with rapid changes came political growing pains. President Bill Clinton, elected in 1992 on a platform of modernization and centrism, oversaw economic growth and welfare reform, but also faced intense scrutiny. In 1998, his impeachment by the House of Representatives over the Monica Lewinsky scandal became one of the most televised and divisive political moments of the decade. Bill Clinton, a charismatic Southern Democrat, became the second president in the United States history to be impeached. Though he was later acquitted by the Senate, his presidency was marked by a strong economy, controversial policies like the 1994 crime bill, and the rise of partisan media that polarized public perception of leadership.
The dot-com bubble was a speculative frenzy in the late 1990s.
There still exists a general state of either denial about both the reality and the potential effects of Y2K.
As the clock clicked towards year 2000, Americans anxiously awaited what some believed would be a digital collapse, the Y2K bug. Spoiler alert, it was mostly a false alarm. But the fear reflected on a broader cultural anxiety. Would our system fail us? Could we trust the digital world where we now so deeply connected to? But the most defining events of the buildup weren't digital. They were deeply human and devastatingly real. September 11th, 2001. 4 coordinated terrorist attacks on American soil, nearly 3,000 lives lost, the Twin Towers collapsed, smoke rose over the Pentagon, and a plane fell from the sky in rural Pennsylvania, brought down by the bravery of passengers who refused to be pawns in an unspeakable act of terror. United Airlines Flight 93 was headed for Washington, D.C. when passengers learned of the other hijackings via cell phone calls. Banding together, they overpowered the terrorists, sacrificing themselves to prevent further tragedy. The plane crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Their final act of courage became a symbol of national resilience. The world changed in an instant. The Bush administration swiftly launched the war on terror. U.S. troops invaded Afghanistan in October 2001, targeting Al-Qaeda and Taliban. In 2003, the U.S. invaded Iraq, based on claims that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction. While Hussein's regime fell, the weapons were never found. What followed was a costly and controversial occupation, the rise of insurgent groups, and a decades-long struggle for stability. By the end of the 2020s, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan had cost over $6 trillion and claimed more than 7,000 American lives. Civilian deaths, displacement, and regional instability added to the toll. These conflicts reshaped foreign policy, the military-industrial complex, and public trust in government narratives. Back home, the U.S. passed the Patriot Act, expanding government surveillance powers. The newly formed Department of Homeland Security reorganized domestic defenses, color-coded terror alerts became part of daily life, and America entered an age of vigilance and fear. And in the background, a new political landscape was forming. The 2004 presidential election, George W. Bush versus John Kerry, unfolded in the shadows of 9/11. National security dominated the debate. Bush won re-election, but political polarization was deepening. In 2005, Condoleezza Rice became the first African-American woman to serve as U.S. Secretary of State, a key figure in shaping post-9/11 foreign policy. Rice played a central role in diplomacy during the Iraq War and was instrumental in promoting transformational diplomacy, aiming to spread democracy through engagement and reform. And then, in 2008, history was made again. Barack Obama, a junior senator from Illinois, was elected the 44th president of the United States, the first black man to hold the office. His campaign, powered by grassroots organizations and social media, promised hope and change. It marked a generational shift, a turning point in American history. Barack Obama's presidency included the passage of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, the killing of Osama bin Laden, and the legalization of same-sex marriage during his tenure. Yet he also faced significant obstruction in Congress and polarized reaction to his policies, a tension that would shape the rise of new political movements. But no president, no moment exists in isolation. Just as the euphoria of 2008 began to fade, the country faced a financial crisis of historic proportions.
Everyone else is watching, and they're seeing these big negative numbers, and their confidence getting.
What the heck is going on down here? I don't know.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped more than 900.
Market didn't work. It broke down. The machines broke down.
Fear came back into the market in a very big... The housing bubble burst. Lehman Brothers collapsed. Millions lost their jobs, homes, and retirement savings. The Great Recession triggered widespread economic hardship and prompted massive government intervention to stabilize the market. Ben Bernanke, the then chairman of the Federal Reserve, led the U.S. response to the 2008 crisis with aggressive interest rate cuts and quantitative easing. Though controversial, his actions are credited with preventing a second Great Depression. By the time the 2010s began, America was deeply transformed by technology, war, crisis, and change. The Arab Spring swept through the Middle East. WikiLeaks, NSA revelations, and whistleblowers exposed the dark underbelly of global surveillance. And at home, a new form of protest was brewing. The Black Lives Matter movement emerged in 2013 after the acquittal of George Zimmerman and the killing of Trayvon Martin. What began as a hashtag became a national reckoning with racial injustice and police violence. The 2014 police killing of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri sparked weeks of protests and a militarized police response. It became a flashpoint in a conversation about systemic racism and justice. The slogans, "Hands up, don't shoot," echoed across the country. Meanwhile, the way Americans consumed information and misinformation was evolving. Facebook and Twitter became political battlegrounds. Algorithms decided what news people saw, and echo chambers deepened. Trust in media eroded. And in 2016, the nation saw perhaps its most shocking political upset in generations. Donald Trump, a businessman and reality TV star, defied political norms, party expectations, and polling predictions to win the presidency. His victory stunned many and delighted others. It was a clear sign the nation was divided. Hillary Clinton, a former First Lady, Senator, and Secretary of State, became the first woman to win a majority party's nomination for president. Though she won a popular vote, she lost the Electoral College to Trump. Reigning debates over the fairness of the electoral system and the role of disinformation in modern elections. By the close of the decade, America was at a crossroads, brimming with progress, boiling with division. And then, in early 2020, the world stopped. COVID-19. A global pandemic unlike anything seen in a century. School closed, businesses shuttered, cities locked down. Over 1 million Americans would die. Millions more would fall into poverty, isolation, and fear. But the crisis also revealed resilience. Essential workers, virtual classrooms, vaccine development in record time. A new chapter was being written in real time. And that is the buildup, the moments, movements, and memories that brought us to the brink of the present. The 21st century was no longer on the horizon. It was here and moving fast. The internet that's once connected a few million dial-up users in the 90s now pulsed through billions of devices. Smartphones shrunk the world into the palm of a hand. Social media platform turns ordinary citizens into broadcasters, influencers, and revolutionaries. But beneath the glossy sheen of innovation, America was changing fast. Let's begin with the power, the kind that moves at the speed of light. In 2007, Apple released the first iPhone, a sleek glass and metal device that combined a phone, camera, music player, and web browser. It redefined not only communication, but identity. Selfies, live streams, and instant commentary became cultural currencies. The digital revolution democratized access to information, but also blurred the lines between truth and illusion. By the 2010s, Americans weren't just browsing, they were building movements. Hashtag Occupy Wall Street, hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag Me Too, hashtag Stop Asian Hate, hashtag became rallying cries. Smartphones capture injustice in real time. Videos of violence, once hidden, now spark global outrage. Protest was no longer confined to marches. It now lived in tweets, stories, and live stream. In 2006, activist Tarana Burke coined the phrase Me Too to raise awareness about sexual violence. In 2017, the following revelations about Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein, the movement exploded globally. Millions of women and men shared their stories, challenging power structures and reshaping workplace norms. The killings of unarmed Black Americans, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and many others ignited waves of protests and demands for systemic reform. In June 2020, after Floyd's murder was broadcast to the world, tens of millions marched in cities across America. It became one of the largest civil rights movements in history. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. The time it took for Officer Derek Chauvin to kneel on George Floyd's neck, as captured on video by a teenage girl. The image became a global symbol, not only of brutality, but of resistance. Murals, chants, legislation, and international solidarity followed. But the protests wasn't the only area of change. The culture itself began to shift rapidly. Streaming services upended Hollywood. Podcasts replaced radio. The definition of celebrity expanded to include gamers, TikTok dancers, and YouTubers with ring lights. Attention spans shortened and entire political arguments played out in 280 characters. Meanwhile, identity, race, gender, sexuality took center stage. In the 2010s, trans rights moved from the margins to mainstream discussion, from celebrities like Laverne Cox and Elliot Page to policy debates on bathroom access and military service. America grappled with questions of identity and dignity in ways it never had before. In 2018, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or AOC, a 28-year-old bartender from the Bronx, defeated a 10-term Democratic incumbent in a stunning upset. A self-described democratic socialist, she brought a new generation of activists to the Hall of Congress. Fluent in memes, unapologetically progressive, and unafraid to challenge the status quo. The political landscape, too, fractured and realigned. Barack Obama's presidency had inspired hope, but also backlash. In 2016, Donald Trump's campaign tapped into widespread discontent with globalization, immigration, and the establishment. His presidency was marked by fierce loyalty from supporters and equally fierce opposition. America became tribal. Facts were contested, institutions were distrusted, and on January 6, 2021, those fractures erupted in violence. After Joe Biden's victory in the 2020 presidential election, a false claim of election fraud culminated in an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Rioters stormed the halls of Congress as lawmakers fled. The nation watched, stunned, as the very symbol of democracy was overrun. That day was not just a political failure, it was a mirror, a reminder that democracy is fragile and demands vigilance. But even amid division, a new kind of patriotism emerged, one rooted not in flags or parties, but in people. Stacey Abrams, a voting rights advocate from Georgia, Abrams mobilized millions of new voters, particularly in communities of colors, and played a key role in the state's historic 2020 Democratic victories. Her work reminded America that change doesn't begin in Washington, it begins in line at the ballot box. And through it all, the pandemics, the protests, the polarizations, Americans persisted. Teachers adapted, scientists innovated, neighbors delivered groceries, nurses held hands, artists created, students logged in, and essential workers kept the lights on, literally and figuratively. COVID-19 upended daily life, exposed inequalities, and reshaped how we work, learn, and mourn. But it also revealed the resilience that always been a part of American story. By the end of 2021, over 200 million Americans had received COVID vaccinations, developed in record time through Operation Warp Speed. Though debates over mandates and misinformation raged on, the vaccine saved countless lives and marked a scientific milestone. And so, we arrive here, in the now, a nation that's weathered storms, survived reckonings, and still asks, who are we becoming? The answers are being written every day, in classrooms, in elections, in protests, in the quiet moments of courage. The events of the modern era weren't isolated tremors. They were tectonic shifts, reshaping the bedrock of American life, and their aftershocks are still being felt. From courtrooms to classrooms, climate marches to congressional hearings, the after effects of the last 3 decades have not faded. They've deepened. This is the aftermath, and it's unfolding in real time. Let's begin with technology. We once marveled at computers that could fill an entire room. Now, a single smartphone holds more computing power than NASA had during the moon landing. And that device, with its buzzing notifications, location tracking, and 24/7 connectivity, is not just a tool, it's a mirror, and it's watching back. From facial recognition software to predictive policing algorithms, the digital age has brought both convenience and concern. Civil Liberties Group warns of encroachment on privacy. Others argue such tools enhance safety. The balance between liberty and security remains a live debate. But technology's impact goes far beyond surveillance. It's reshaped our economy. Entire industries, from taxis to retail to journalism, have been disrupted by apps and automation. AI tools now write, paint, and even diagnose diseases, and yet millions of Americans feel left behind. Andrew Yang, a tech entrepreneur and 2020 presidential candidate, made headlines by proposing a universal basic income, a monthly payment to all Americans to offset job losses from automation. While controversial, the idea sparked national conversations about work, dignity, and the future of capitalism. Meanwhile, another challenge has crept closer with every passing summer: climate change. Once a distant concern, is now a daily reality. Wildfires in California, hurricanes battering the Gulf Coast, record-breaking heat waves in Phoenix, and floods in Vermont. In 2021, the United Nations issued a dire warning: human-driven climate change is accelerating faster than expected. With bold action, the consequences, sea level rise, extreme weather, food insecurity, could become catastrophic within our lifetimes. And yet, the U.S. response has been mixed. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2020 marked the largest climate investment in American history, a major step towards reducing carbon emissions. But opposition remains fierce. Misinformation, corporate lobbying, and partisan gridlock continue to stall more sweeping reforms. While the planet heats up, the culture simmers too. In state houses across the country, debates rage over race, gender, and education, what books can be taught, and what history should be told. The battle for American souls now runs through its school boards. Nicole Hannah Jones, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and creator of the 1619 Project, reframed U.S. history around a legacy of slavery and black contribution. Lauded by some, vilified by others, her work has become a flashpoint in national debates about race, curriculum, and memory. And in a time of pandemic and protests, truth itself has become slippery. From QAnon to vaccine conspiracies, from deep fakes to media mistrust, America's information ecosystem has fractured. One person's fact is another's hoax. Cable news, silos, algorithm bubbles, and partisan platforms feed our biases and widen our divides. Studies show that nearly 70% of Americans say they struggle to tell fact from fiction in the news. The rise of deep fakes, AI-generated videos indistinguishable from reality has only deepened the crisis of trust. Democracy thrives on shared reality. But when that reality fractures, the consequences ripple outward. January 6th wasn't the end of something, it was the beginning of a reckoning. And then came the pandemic. COVID-19 wasn't just a virus, it was a spotlight. It exposed inequalities in housing, healthcare, broadband access, and labor protections. Communities of color were hit the hardest, not because of biology, but because of long-standing systemic disparities. Dr. Kizzmekia Corbett was the lead scientist on the NIH team that developed the modern COVID-19 vaccine. Dr. Corbett, a black woman, broke barriers in medicine and representation, and her work helped save millions and inspired a new generation of scientists from underrepresented communities. Even now, in the wake of vaccines and reopening, the scars remain. Mental health crises, learning loss, long COVID, shuttered businesses, and burnt out workers, but also resilience. Mutual aid groups, virtual graduation, drive-by birthday parties, TikTok dance trends. Americans, as always, found ways to adapt and laugh through tears. Born into lockdowns, gun drills, and climate anxiety, Generation Z has emerged as a vocal force. From Greta Thunberg's climate strikes to students organizing walkouts after school shootings, Gen Z combines digital fluency with deep political urgency. So what's next? That's the question every American, from barbershops to boardroom, is still asking. Will democracy hold? Can we bridge our divides? Will the future be more than just the past? The answers aren't written in stone. They're being written every day. In classrooms, on ballots, in art, in protests, in us. And that's what makes the aftermath of the modern era unfinished. Because history doesn't end in the present. It echoes forward. We begin this season in the smoke and struggle of revolution. 13 colonies grappling for independence, a ragtag militia taking on the world's mightiest empire. And now, here we are, in a world of smartphones and streaming wars, of tweets and tests, launches, of viral dances and virtual classrooms. History didn't just lead us here, it shaped us. Every moment we explored this season, from the ink of the Constitution to the glow of Silicon Valley servers, is part of the living DNA of America. The modern era, in all its complexity, reminds us that progress is never a straight line. For every leap forward, there are stumbles. For every movement born, there is pushback. For every voice raised, another tries to silence it. Yet, in this messy, noisy, electrifying era, we've seen one truth stand tall. The American story is still being written. What does freedom of speech mean in a digital world? How do we balance security with privacy in an age of surveillance? Who gets to tell the American story, and whose stories have been missing? Can democracy survive disinformation, polarization, and climate crisis? These aren't questions for textbook, they're the questions of now. We've examined tragedies and triumphs, from 9/11 to the Black Lives Matters movement, from the COVID-19 pandemic to the election of America's first black president, and through it all, one thing is clear. America is an ideal still under construction. It's not perfect. It never was, but it strives. And that striving, that refusal to settle for injustice, that hunger to do better, that's the heartbeat of this country. In 2021, at the age of 22, Amanda Gorman, poet, stood at the Capitol and recited "The Hill We Climb" during President Joe Biden's inauguration. Her words, a fusion of hope and realism, captured the spirit of a generation determined to rebuild America with courage and clarity. We are not broken. We are unfinished. As we close the curtain on season 1 of International Narratives, The Birth of a Nation, I want to say thank you. Thank you for pressing play. Thank you for showing up. And thank you for traveling through history with us, not just to learn the past, but to better understand the present. But friends, this isn't goodbye. It's a handoff, because next season, we're going even deeper. Before there were states, there were ideas. Before the Constitution, there were debates. And before America became a nation, it was a question mark. In our next season, The Foundation of American Democracy, we'll explore the principles and documents that birthed the American experiment, from the Federalist Papers to landmark Supreme Court cases. From the birth of political parties to the battle over voting rights, we'll uncover the bedrock of what we call democracy. What does it mean to be a citizen? Where does power comes from? And how do we hold it accountable? These aren't just lessons for history buffs, they're tools for today's challenges. So whether you're listening on your morning commute or curled up with your headphones at night, I hope this season made history a little more alive, a little more human, because it is. These weren't just debates and documents, they were people, dreams, fights, failures, movements. They were messy, miraculous, and maddening, just like us. And they still matter, because the past is not the past, it's prologue. Until next time, I'm Johnny Young. And this has been The Birth of a Nation, Key Moments in Early American History, presented by International Narratives. Stay curious, stay grounded, and keep exploring the stories that made us who we are, because America's story isn't finished, it's just getting started.
If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, and share the podcast with others who love history and global stories. Got a correction, a suggestion, or a country you'd like featured? Reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, and remember, every nation has a story worth telling.